I'm now joined by our producer here at GTAA, Forrest Miller, the YouTube producer at Jacobin, Cale Brooks, and also for the first time on one of these, Jacobin and many other places, writer Luke Savage. So,
How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah. This should be really good. And you know, Luke being here, you know, should have been the most exciting thing about this stream, but you're
telling me there's something more exciting?
There is something more exciting, which is this, you know, Cale has come on to talk to us about Kubrick movies before, and he always has a lot to say. We did a very, very deep dive on The Shining on here. And it really hit me as I was rewatching it. I watched it a couple of years ago, but I watched it again today to get ready for this. That one of the things we heard about last time was this like conspiracy theory according to which there are scenes in The Shining which are Kubrick making a coded confession for helping to fake the moon landing. And it just occurred to me, it's like, man, what is he confessing to in Eyes Wide Shut?
It's not as big of a deal, honestly. I think The Shining has the real scoop, but there's some stuff going on in this one.
He wanted to get his affairs in order for when he inevitably showed up, possibly on the Epstein flight logs. You know, he
never did.
He never did, but you know, just in case, you know, you never really knew who was gonna show up in his black book. So
fair enough. Yeah.
Well, it wouldn't have been Kubrick because he famously after 1965, I'm ballparking it, like
never got on an airplane.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, he stayed in England for everything, which honestly smart of him, because you know it feels like this movie kind of, you know, as a way to like kind of slam the powerful, the wealthy, like, you know, people that Kubrick would have probably been within their circles if he had traveled, you know what I mean? Like, it's very interesting that as a recluse kind of, I mean, you know, that this is his movie to make.
Yeah. So I remember actually after we did the one on Full Metal Jacket, somebody who had been was like Milnius's assistant or something, like tracked down my GSU email and emailed me to explain why we were wrong about the various political things we were reading into that movie. And part of his thing was that, look, it's, you know, the fact that Kubrick did this particular story really has very little to do with the story. It's just that he was ransacking books about Vietnam to find one that he could film in London.
It's a good one. It's a good movie. So
no, it is very good movie. You know,
but in the case of the movie we're discussing today, I mean, the fact that Kubrick couldn't leave Britain or wouldn't, and that New York City is basically just like a stage. I mean, this would be a completely different movie if this was actual New York. Like, the movie has this like dreamlike quality that's so integral to its vibes, and it wouldn't have that if like Tom Cruise were getting inexplicably bullied by small groups of young men, like in actual New York.
Yeah. No, it would, you know, feel a lot more real and like almost like gritty, instead of kind of having this. It almost has like a Catcher in the Rye vibe to it, is what I noticed on this watch through. Like, it's kind of like Catcher in the Rye for adults, because, you know, it's Tom Cruise is kind of like Holden Caulfielding it around this like dreamlike version of New York City, and kind of just like meeting people and having adventures and being extremely neurotic, and like, you know, having his like, you know, thinking about like sex and power and money and like all this stuff. And it, you know, it has like this, like, I remember like as a teenager reading Catcher in the Rye and kind of getting the same vibe from it, of just like imagining, I mean, not Tom Cruise per se, but like, you know, like just like an actor playing Holden Caulfield, just being like driven around the city and getting into like various encounters.
Yeah, right. Although I guess the big difference, you know, from what I can remember from Catcher in the Rye, is that Holden Caulfield is super alienated from everything around him, and he thinks everybody's a phony and all this stuff. Whereas, you know, Dr. Bill, certainly key parts of this movie. He, you know, he wants to and thinks that he can kind of mingle with the rich and powerful, which is which I mean I guess is my big take on the movie, that it's that to like it's really much more about class dynamics than it is about sex. So.
Mhm.
Oh, Bill is steeped in pure ideology. It's
Well,
I
confess I never thought of the Catcher in the Rye analogy watching this movie, but I mean, I didn't read Catcher in the Rye as a teenager, which is I think when one appreciates it the most. I think I read it at something like age 25, and I was astonished at how not transgressive it was. And you could say the same thing about Eyes Wide Shut, at least in terms of like how the film presents sexuality, because it's really a film about an upper middle class couple that is for some reason incredibly insecure about like the most like banal human encounters, and which is apparently they've been married for 7 or 8 years and have never thought about the prospect of sex outside of marriage. I'm honestly, I mean, they have children. I'm not sure they've ever had sex, but
that's like the I don't want to butcher it, but the Catherine Liu just came out with a good, very polemical book on the PMC, and she has a chapter in there where it's like the PMC like discovers sex or something like that. I have to try to find it, but just that like these people don't experience pleasure. They're just like full of anxiety. They're full of like these like. There is this ideology, I think, like, and we can kind of get into this in more detail, but like so much of this ultimately is like, I think Bill's understanding of what power is in these elite circles, both like in kind of in the first party and in kind of like these scenes before and after kind of his big night adventure. But I think like insofar as like all of the events that happen at night have a dreamlike quality to them, I think you can also understand them as kind of as a fantasy, as like, and it's a fantastical version of what the ruling class is. And there's truth to it, but then there's also, I think, kind of exaggerated aspects. But we can go into that.
Well, for sure. And I mean, I think one way of reading it is that the second party. Like the first party is real, but the second party is like a crazy dream based on the first party, like with everything turned up to 11. But yeah, I think the Catherine Liu point is exactly the right one. That like there's a really good old review I was just looking for where like the first paragraph of the review is about how. We see Nicole Kidman naked like 30 seconds into the movie, and it's in a very like casual, very unsexy way, sort of Kubrick signaling, look, this is not what this movie is about. Look, you want to see that the famous movie star naked? Here you go. Fine, whatever. Like, focus, guys. This is about something else. And
the sex, like the orgy itself, like the sex cult doesn't seem.
No, it's like a really weirdly sexless orgy in a lot of ways.
It feels more like it's about like the sneaking around and passwords and wearing masks and like that whole charade and like the ritual of it. Rather than like it is about actually having sex with hookers that you found in like strange and interesting ways. None of it really seems that interesting.
No, exactly.
There's a visual. There's a visual parallel with The Shining, actually, where at the party there's someone who it looks like they're giving fellatio, they're giving head to someone else, but it's impossible because they're all wearing masks, which is the same thing, which at the end of The Shining, which I think has similar but different thematic importance in that movie of like but it's both trying to it's an impossible physical situation, so it's most likely therefore symbolic.
I feel like we referenced, or it got referenced, I don't remember if it was you, Cale, or someone else during our Shining stream. We talked about that really quickly, the mass scene and Eyes Wide Shut.
It was like 3 hours of that stream. Of like the full 12 hours.
No, my brain was fried. It was longer than the actual fucking Shining. It
was literally longer than The Shining, and I've got to worry, Luke. This is extremely unusual, but there were a bunch of people on that stream. It was my birthday. I've been drinking all afternoon. It was and Cale had a lot to say. Like he has. It's like he'd come down from the university where he'd spent years, working up a thesis on The Shining, and he had to share it. But yeah, I mean, I think the Catherine Liu thing is on point. That that like if you think about it, like a lot of what seems to be going on here is that Bill is somebody who sort of upper reaches of the PMC is this extremely successful doctor. And because that means that compared to most people he probably interacts with most of the time, although certainly not some of his patients, he's a extremely respected person. He always has money. And so he thinks that means that he can, party with the masters of the universe.
And just buy his way in.
And a lot of what the movie is about is about like, no guy, you're just like, you're a bug on these people's windshield.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I think that the position of doctor is very interesting because, we think of doctor as like kind of a white collar like profession that, they're like, I mean, medical doctor, like as a white collar profession, like one of the, I guess, higher up, like, in communities, at least one of like the kind of higher up professions on like class wise. But, if you're somebody who's like, in this position and you have a doctor that does house calls, like they're as much a worker to you as anybody else really that you interact with. So the class dynamics of somebody who's positioned maybe in the broader, I guess, like non-bourgeois society, I guess, like compared to like working people, I guess, like especially with bureaucracy and stuff, like the position of doctor is, as much as it's on this hierarchy, like if you're like if you're someone who's like in elite status, like your doctor is just on call, like there's no real difference between your doctor and any other worker really that
No, exactly. And so like the first party, I mean, they're even commenting on it, that like in the conversation between Bill and Alice at the first party, like how weird it is that they're even there, because like this guy who actually is a member of the real no kidding ruling class, like has a sort, like he likes his doctor, and so he, to a certain extent, he treats him as a friend and he invites him to things, but like also the difference is pretty clear.
And why is he actually there? I mean, it's clear because of what like happens soon after that. Right. Probably the reason that Bill was invited is because his services were going to be required, or were probably going to be required.
Or it could have been.
Yeah, or at least he wanted him on standby just in case something like this happened. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So let's get into the plot. Bill and Alice Hartford, well-to-do Manhattan couple, been married for 9 years. Bill's a doctor with his own private practice. Alice is a full-time mother, although she managed an art gallery in the past. A 7-year-old daughter named Helena, whom they leave with a babysitter for the evening while they attend a Christmas party thrown by...
By the way, is this... I just want to get everyone's... is this a Christmas movie? Like,
yes, 100%.
Yeah, right? It is. Technically, Eyes Wide Shut is...
No, they should show this instead of the Christmas Story, like incessantly in the weeks leading up to Christmas.
Top 3 Christmas movie. I'll let you figure out the other 2, but...
This and Die Hard.
Yeah. Let's see. So it's Victor Ziegler's Christmas party. While at the party, Bill runs into an old friend, Dick Nightingale. Nick dropped out of medical school to become a pianist. Before returning to his place among the band, he invites Bill to come see him at another gig while he's in town. So while Alice drunkenly fends off the advances of an unctuous middle-aged Hungarian businessman, Bill flirts with 2 models. Alice dances with Sandor, the Hungarian, but finally gives him the slip when he invites her upstairs, citing the fact that she is married.
Do you think we were supposed to understand that, like the Hungarian, like what Sandor, like were we supposed to understand that he probably was one of the people who's most definitely at that sex cult orgy? Like it never really gets it never really comes up as a callback, I don't think, but like I don't know, he definitely was.
I don't know, that character is so kind of unreal or hyper real. I feel like he actually, he might represent some pushback against the idea that the first party is real and the second one's fake. I mean, how can a party be real if that guy's there?
Right.
Yeah, and it is also kind of amazing, like actually both in that conversation that Alice has with Sandor while they're dancing, and then also later when she and Bill are high, like, I don't know, like a few glasses of champagne or like a joint shouldn't get anybody to quite that. Like she seemed like just crazy, slow, disassociated, like again, so super dreamlike.
Right. There's something uncanny or like hyper real about so much of like the entire movie, but especially the acting. And I don't know if that explains the first party scene, but I definitely do think, I mean, it's a part of the production history and part of like I was going to say, I think a more practical reason for why they ended up shooting in London and they created a set of New York. They did, this shoot was like a year and a half. It was, I think it's historically the longest film shoot of principal photography of just like the actual actors. Like they had massive movie stars on set for this extended period of time, kept Tom Cruise away from the Scientology world. It destroyed Tom and Nicole's marriage. And like there's people have said there's going to be a lot of people have said, I think, but people have said that that like Kubrick pretty intentionally like was like fucking with everyone, like especially Tom and Nicole. And so like
why wouldn't you if you have Tom Cruise on set, like why wouldn't you spend the entire film shoot fucking with Tom Cruise?
I don't know. Again, he's
very easy to like make snap, and like that's the only way to get a performance out of him.
I mean, he's not a bad actor. I mean, he's not one of our greatest actors we've ever produced, but he's not like a bad actor. I mean, I think the point is that like it was somewhat unique that he was like fucking with him, that he did so many takes, and I think it's something that he's done on a number of films, including The Shining, where you just keep doing takes until you wear down these like professionally trained actors to the point where they just start acting really weird and it's unnatural. So like especially like when we're kind of jumping the gun a bit, but like when Tom and Nicole are high, and it's not real. Like none of it. So much of the acting is just so not how people actually exist, and it has to be like intentional because Kubrick had enough takes to find one that would have worked. Like these aren't amateurs. So
and he's also like not his masterpiece. Like I mean, at least like as far as Kubrick movies go, I feel like that like this isn't the movie that people are going to necessarily like remember him for. You know what I mean? Like it's not. I don't know.
No, but I think that's a different. I think that's a different question.
Yeah, I think it's a very different question. I think what Cale's describing, I mean, a lot of this is stuff you could say about The Shining, right? I mean, like that this is that he's getting like these very intentionally getting these like creepily uncanny performances out of people to create a very specific effect.
Ben, yeah. I feel like we should let you get through the plot before we.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's at least get through. Let's not the entire thing, but let's at least get through a chunk of it and then talk about it. So let's see. So Alice dances with Sandor. Finally gives him the slip when he invites her upstairs, citing the fact that she's married. Just as the models offer to show Bill where the rainbow ends. While we're at Dreamlike. He is discreetly summoned upstairs for an apparent emergency. Ziegler had been partying upstairs with an escort, Mandy, while she shot up a mixture of heroin and cocaine. She passes out, scaring Ziegler. Bill rouses the naked woman back to consciousness, determining that she'll safely recover. He chides her to get some help for her addiction. Let's see. The next night, Alice rolls a joint, and she and Bill get stoned. It's the scene we were talking about. She asks Bill what he was doing with the two models. He denies hitting on them and asks Alice about the man he saw dancing with her. She says he wanted to have sex with her, which Bill jokes is understandable. Man, this is a really detailed summary. This might actually be too detailed. So
I found one that was several pages. Like I was looking and like a bunch of them were like way too short. Like it was like these like, I don't know, like 2 paragraphs or something. And I was like, that's not, like, we can't do this with that. And then I found one that was like 16 pages that was just like, and had like pictures of all the scenes. And I was like, okay, so, you know, it's got to be somewhere between these two.
Yeah, I think this might still be erring on the side of too detailed, but in any case, they have this conversation. They get stoned. They have this conversation. Alice describes basically detailed fantasies that she had about a young naval officer that they met on vacation, or that they saw, like the next table.
Yeah.
It's like a very I don't know.
It's a frightening story about how she was like faintly horny one time several years
exactly.
ago.
Okay. Well, and like the point is like, because he's like, oh, women don't get horny, basically, and she's like, well, I'll tell you this one example from a really long time ago, and that's therefore proves that women are horny too.
There's got to be like a follow up though, where like Nicole Kidman tells Tom Cruise that like women orgasm. And he has like such a big mental breakdown that he accidentally stumbles on like the Epstein Island, and that's how the story breaks.
I mean, he that might have happened. He might have ended up there. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is. We'll get to it, but I mean, if you do want to do the sort of same structure as the inferences people make about The Shining and the moon landing, that there is a way you could read this as a Epstein thing, even beyond the obvious, I think. But in any case, after this happens, this conversation where Alice describes. I mean, it's kind of funny because on the one hand, it's the biggest nothing in the world. She's just describes like, oh yeah, I saw this guy and and I was horny and I fantasized about it. It's like, oh, okay, but then like. She also goes into like all this detail about how she would have been ready to like leave Bill for him and all this that is like kind of crazy given where they started. But she's a dick about it. She's definitely a dick about the way that she explains her exactly. So then Bill gets a call that a wealthy patient of his has died, and he needs to go make an appearance. And this is one of like a bunch of things like this that happen in the movie. That he goes over to the house, and and the guy's daughter, who he's like barely ever spoken to, is there, and like by the kind of the conversation, she randomly confesses that she's in love with him, and she kisses him. And then
these Eastern Europeans, like you just go and they're just all fucking horny, and like the Berlin Wall fell, and like it's just the curtain was like pulled back, and all these horny Eastern Europeans came and wanted to fuck Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman.
Fair enough.
I learned that from the Mike Huckabee videos.
Yeah, nice.
I mean. I don't want to impart too much. I don't want to say like what Kubrick's intention is too much, because I don't know, and no one really knows aside from him when he was alive. But I mean, it just like it seems so obvious that like he has such contempt for, like, again, if the stories are true, contempt for the actual actors, but like the people that they're supposed to be playing, the professional life, that it's so kind of mechanical. It's like it's so dull, wrapped up in its, I don't know, its arrogance, and whether it's the first party, like how all those interactions go, where or whether it's the fight, whether it's like meeting the patient's daughter, and like her immediately coming on to him and saying like, I want to leave my professional boyfriend for you. And it's like, it's these people, it's like how they experience relationships is so stilted, and so like some of it's transactional, but some of it's just like, this is what we're supposed to do now, and like it's planned out almost. And again, that's part of like it's not just the acting, it's the actual relationships and the way that these people are like relating and reacting to one another. That again, I can't help but think that it's a big fuck you. But maybe that's my sensibilities bleeding over.
Well, I mean, I think that, looking at how Kubrick actually lived, I think that definitely has some validity. Like, the fact that he didn't leave England wasn't that he couldn't leave England. The fact that he didn't leave England is because he wanted to do everything close to his house. He didn't want to really interact with these people. He didn't want to go to like these big parties with all these actors, or he would have. You know what I mean? Like, so his relationship ties feel like they're a lot deeper with his family, who he was with constantly. Like, he, you know what I mean? Like, I was just watching. There was kind of like a documentary that they did right after his death about Eyes Wide Shut, and the family was like, they were talking about how like in 15 years, like, he didn't even like, he barely left his house, and he barely left within like 10 miles of his house. Like, and people would come to him, like, people would constantly be at his house, like, helping him with the film process. But like, you know, it feels like it is contempt for these people, because I think he would have made different choices if he wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. I think there's definitely a lot of contempt there. I mean, I remember when this movie first came out, you know, when I guess Forrest and Luke were little kids, and, you know,
I was 10 years old.
Cale wouldn't be born yet for another 5 years or so. I remember reading an interview with Nicole Kidman about it, where there's a question about is Stanley Kubrick a misogynist, and she was like, "Well, I mean, I don't know that he likes any people." Right? You know, like,
there's a story that Malcolm McDowell tells on so I have the only like somewhat comprehensive Kubrick box set on Blu-ray, which it's kind of annoying. It doesn't have Paths of Glory. It doesn't have Spartacus. It doesn't.
You're right.
It doesn't have. It doesn't have. God, I'm going to be embarrassed when you tell me, Cale, what the title was. But what's the great heist movie that he did in the 50s? The like one where they robbed the racetrack. You know the one I'm talking about.
Fears of Desire, or no?
What's the? I don't know.
I know which one you're
you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, doesn't have those ones. But comes with a documentary that's not bad. And Malcolm McDowell was interviewed in it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, after we did A Clockwork Orange, it's like we were really tight on the set. We talked a lot. I spent a lot of time with him." And Malcolm McDowell just sort of said, he's like, "I just assumed we would be friends after, and that this would be like a relationship that we'd have for the rest of our lives." And like, that's not what happened at all. Like, I don't know how much he saw Kubrick after that, like, if at all. Kubrick was a genuinely reclusive figure, and whether contempt, you know, is the right, I'm not sure that's necessarily the right word, but then again, I can't think of another one for, you know, for that kind of attitude, and it comes through in this movie.
Speaking of Malcolm McDowell, I had this so I watched this movie yesterday, and then I went to dinner with Maria, knew some guy who I guess does like couch surfing or whatever, like that app. And it was like this old guy who was talking to us about how he'd been to Bohemian Grove 3 times. And he told us that he hated Eyes Wide Shut because he thought it was Kubrick's worst movie. And then he told us that he had met Malcolm McDowell sitting at a bar in Bohemian Grove. And he was like telling us the story, and the story of how he got to Bohemian Grove sounded exactly like Eyes Wide Shut. Like he told us like his jazz player cousin like accidentally stumbled into it because somebody liked how he played music, and he ended up as a member or something. And I was like, Jesus Christ, like, you hate this movie because it sounds like you're living like that.
But that's actually a good thing to bring up, because we've been talking about the film in relation to the kind of like PMC characters, these like upper middle class professionals, and their status anxiety, and also their prudishness. But you can also interpret this movie as like, I mean, like, what the hell is this orgy? What is this secret society? From what I know about Bohemian Grove, it's actually pretty like pretty goofy. They just put on costumes, and like I've heard interviews with people who've been there, like actors and stuff, and like it's cosplay, right? Like it's LARPing. Like it's people who may be obscenely rich, and they may have a lot of power and influence and fame or whatever. But allegedly anyway, they're not doing anything that's particularly sinister. They're cosplaying as if they're doing that, but they're not. And like the same thing is true of this of like the mansion party, whatever you want to call it, the mask ball in Eyes Wide Shut. It's like Cale mentioned the thing about like there's people having oral sex and they're wearing masks. I mean, like it's not even like they're cosplaying the whole thing, but they're even cosplaying the sex part. Like they're not even actually having sex, or like some of them aren't.
Well, it's a sense of boredom, I think, that kind of is felt by characters at all levels. Like clearly Nicole Kidman is kind of bored with her existence, and so is Dr. Bill. They're kind of bored with their like upper middle class existence. They want to get into. I mean, I'd say they're even further than I think upper middle class, because their apartment is really, really fucking nice. Like, but they're in that like kind of like wealthy but not elite bracket, and they desperately wanting to get into the next class bracket. They're having this kind of dull boredom where they haven't, like, they're not at the point where they're doing this like mass ball stuff. But then at the actual mass ball, like they are cosplaying, and it kind of feels like they're so bored with that existence that they've created like this whole secret society that doesn't actually fucking do anything. But the secret, like, they need passwords.
Well, let's get to that. So
I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't seen this. I've just been following Ben's him explain the plot.
Let's catch Cale up.
Yeah, Ben, what happens next? I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, right, exactly. So after he leaves the house, and by the way, that when the daughter of the dead man's boyfriend, like when she talks about him, like it's again, you do definitely get this contempt that like that her boyfriend is this like professor who's going to move to Michigan. And like he's like, oh no, I hear it's nice, right? That like it's like you could really tell, like you pat on the head, right?
He teaches philosophy.
yeah, exactly.
He's moving to Michigan to start a podcast.
That's right. The podcaster boyfriend, right? So then walking through the streets, Bill sees a hooker making out with John, continues to be plagued by images that's haunting him the entire movie. Even after he's seen the orgy and everything, he's still obsessing about what Alice didn't actually do years ago.
Well, that's later.
He thinks about other men.
Yeah. Well, no, that's later, but he does continue to have these flashes later. Let's see. Minutes later, a group of drunken frat boys shove Bill down on the sidewalk, baiting him with homophobic taunts, which seemed very extreme. As Bill continues wandering downtown, a prostitute named Domino propositions him. He hesitates, but agrees to accompany her to her apartment nearby.
Which classiest prostitute really ever in a movie? I mean, like the casual way she's kind of like, oops, hey, like, would you want to come have sex in my apartment? Like, I don't know, like it's kind of. That's very dreamlike, like, you know what I mean? Like the more, I guess, the more gauche act of like approaching somebody and soliciting them on the street, like, doesn't really happen. It's more of it's just kind of like a prostitute like appears when he needs one or when he wants.
Well, again,
one.
I think it's like it's how like a PMC person thinks hookers actually exist. Like it's not, none of this is real. Like it's. Well, not that none of it's real, but I think a lot of like this midsection in the movie, it's like how Bill thinks the world works.
Yeah, I mean the line when he's the line when he's in Domino, the sex worker's apartment, and she says something like she asks him a question and he responds with his own question where he's like, "What would you recommend?"
It's like, what do you want? And he's like, I don't know. What do you recommend?
And then she's like,
he's never had sex
about it, which fits in with what you're saying, because she's a prostitute, but he can't imagine somebody being that different from, like, even dealing with a prostitute in his imagination would just be like flirting, right? That she wouldn't just be like, well, here are the options, like.
Well, it's like the concept that the PMC kind of still have of like the escort service, like, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of prostitution as like a business that attends to like the powerful. Like, it's not prostitution in terms of like how it actually exists for normal people. You know what I mean? Like it's a very class.
It's very glamorous, whereas like most sex workers have a horrific life.
Yeah.
Like that most people would never choose that life because it's awful. Like
it's like what somebody would see in like porn. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just like somebody like living in a, like, oh, I'm just like a college age girl, like living with another college age girl, and like, haha, she's out of town for right now. Like, you want to have sex in my apartment for $150? Like, not like the more horrific condition.
Yeah. So then that doesn't happen, right? Like all the times that anybody that he's about to have sex in the movie, it doesn't happen. gets interrupted by Alice calling him. What were you gonna say, Cale?
When there's just one of the like little details that I love is that when she takes him into the apartment and he like is looking at the apartment and he's just seeing like because he's been his apartment's like beautiful, like like especially I live in the East Village, it's unbelievably beautiful. To like to imagine that in New York, and then like the house party or like the mansion on the east side that at the beginning of the big party or any of these other like interiors that we've been in so far are like these gorgeous, like extremely expensive places, and then he enters into this like it's a tinier it's a working class apartment, like it's run down, there's a bathtub in the kitchen, and he's looking at it and his only thing he can say is like, oh, I like your Christmas tree.
Well, he also says it's cozy, but
yeah. But I also think, and we can get into this more as it kind of continues to develop. But I do think like so much of like the Christmas trees and the Christmas lights, and especially because the Christmas lights, when they are shown in the movie, they are the rainbow lights. It's not like all white lights or something. Like I think it does have a symbolic meaning throughout the movie, and it's something to do with like Bill's fantasies and so you could go full Freudian and just say like it's libido and maybe, but like I think just minimally it has something to do.
Though? Like he kind of has like he's like 12-year-old boy libido. Like he doesn't like, you know what I mean? Like the fact that he doesn't even really know what he wants from the prostitute. He's like, oh, like what do you like even his like sexual fantasies is like it's like a 12-year-old boy like imagining what sex like what they imagine sex is like when they haven't had sex. Like it really is that.
Yeah. So does it happen, of course, right? Like other than like I guess you see some stuff as you're
Dr. Bill is not a closer.
Yeah, exactly. So he gets the call from Alice. He leaves, but he doesn't go home. He goes to find his friend, the pianist, which is also like, again, all the stuff about class dynamics in this movie, that he's the friend who's the pianist, who needs the money enough. He's happy to like play blindfolded at the the weird masked orgy.
Really sick gig.
Is a med school dropout.
At least the piece is pretty easy to play. There's only 2 notes.
That's true. So it doesn't really matter if you're blindfolded.
Yeah, it's not exactly. It's not Rachmaninoff. It's like you play with 2 fingers.
But even he seems kind of it's not even as much like desperation and needing money as much as it seems like this weird like class boredom. Like
maybe. Although, well, actually, so they're 2, right? Like it's suggested that the reason that he's doing this instead of being a doctor is just boredom, like a dialogue that he just like he likes walking away from things. It was his explanation of why he dropped out of med school. But he also does seem to suggest that he, why is he like it's Christmas and he's on the opposite end of the family, the country from his family. Is like, look, you just got to go where where the work is, and any like crappy little pickup band, that wants him, that's going to pay him, he's going to take.
No, 100%. But like on another level, like it also seems like, instead of picking a more I guess stable career, he picked jazz musician, and it seems like a lot of that, it seems like he legitimately enjoys traveling and like seeing the like interesting things, and it's put like I don't know, like it's not put in terms of like desperation for Bill. You know what I mean? Like it's not like he sits there and thinks like, wow, this guy has like a fucked up existence. Like he, like in his head is kind of like I like, oh well, I kind of just travel around and play piano. Like sometimes I'm blindfolded, but there's these beautiful women around. Like it's still kind of like this not like non-realistic. Like I like the dreamlike part of this conversation, I guess, because it does feel kind of dreamlike. Like he's like an old style jazz, like traveling the country jazz musician.
Yeah. So he meets up with this guy, and he finds out that there's going to be this this event where the pianist is going to be playing blindfolded, and people are going to be wearing masks and all this stuff. And so Bill determines that he has to be there. And then he goes to the costume shop, Rainbow Fashions, because he thinks that the owner, a patient of his, will help him with a costume as a favor. However, the store is under new ownership, and the man who opens the door, another one of the many like comical and creepy Eastern Europeans in this movie, will tells Bill to come back during business hours. Bill offers Milich a generous amount of money to rent him a costume now. While leading Bill to the showroom, Milich catches his teenage daughter clad in only her underwear, cavorting with two similarly dressed older Japanese businessmen in a dressing room. As his daughter cowers behind Bill, Milich expresses outrage at their lack of decency. He locks the men in the room and threatens to call the police on them after he has served Bill. So you get... that's sad. Antonio said he has a friend who became a jazz pianist after finishing school. He never told me that I got these sorts of gigs.
Well, the guy that I was talking about last night, the Bohemian Grove guy, his cousin was like a famous jazz musician in San Antonio, and that's how they got into Bohemian Grove, which is it just was funny after hearing, so like maybe, who knows?
Yeah, fair enough.
Maybe Epstein's personal piano player at some point.
Yeah, which is it's kind of funny actually, because I knew in Miami, I knew somebody who had like a doctorate of musicology from there, but he was just doing like gig work, like as a musician. And since like I was also at the time, I was just adjunct in, so there was a lot of sort of like pour a shot late at night, Dr. Burgess, Doctor. His last name is so fucking meaningless, But as far as I know, he didn't get any of the Eyes Wide Shut gigs either. But who knows?
You're not supposed to talk about them.
Fair enough. Well, this is the basic problem that Bill's friend does blab about it, and thus gets everybody into trouble. So he goes to the mansion. There's a password. Everybody's wearing masks. It's extremely unstealthy. Bill arrives in a taxi, which it's like it's like I'm sure this won't look weird that like
he doesn't even go like, hey, like just park down the street and like
right.
Like he's just like, hey, stay here, keep the meter running as long as it takes.
He's just blatantly has a taxi parked outside for him, so nobody could possibly mix he has a drive right up front, right, and like idle right up front, and then even after he gets out of the taxi, the guards clearly see him getting out of the taxi. At this point, he's not wearing his mask either, and
giving everybody COVID.
I know, right? Like that's where I was going with that. And he says, "Oh, so I suppose I should give you the password now?" Like, which again doesn't seem very like
it's Fidelio.
It doesn't seem like he's trying very hard to fit in.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like again, it feels like a dream insofar as it's like, oh, what am I supposed to do here? Oh, I need to get there. So how, let me just kind of conjure up how I get places. Oh, I'm going to take a taxi. Oh, I now need to get into the place. What do I do now? I think I say the password. I'm going to say the password now, and then we're going to keep going. And like, it's, again, I don't know. It's, so I think what like ends up happening with the, I don't want to say like all of this is necessarily a dream, but insofar as it has dreamlike qualities, it's something of like, Bill's understanding of what all of these things are, all these certain kind of rituals, all these certain kinds of interactions. So whether it's with the hooker, whether it's with getting into a secret, like getting to climb the ladder and be with the elites, and there's something like fantastical, and it's coming from like this professional understanding of the world.
Yeah.
There's also like kind of feels like almost like a big fish, bigger fish kind of thing going on, like where like Bill kind of, I mean, he's obviously like the whole movie is throwing around money. Anytime he wants something, he's like, oh, here's an extra $100 for it. Here's an extra $100, and he's interacting with all these people that he feels are like lower than him on the class hierarchy, like whether it's the guy at the mask store, even though he's the new person that owns it, but it's still somebody that like, originally he's looking for his own client, like, or the taxi driver, or anyone he really gives money to. He arrives at this like
and he's even constantly doing this thing in the movie that maybe people really do. I've certainly never observed it or heard of it in any other context, but it is interesting in terms of the class point that he's constantly flashing his like medical board card to prove to people that he's a doctor.
As if he's a cop too, like as if he's like law enforcement. He's like, oh, don't worry, I'm a doctor. Like here's my. In the same way that like in a movie about like cops, like a cop would be like, don't worry, I'm a cop, and like show you their badge.
Yeah, but that's literally how professionals use credentials. Like they just don't have to flash it in real life. But
credentials are just identity politics for the PMC.
Right.
But I think he also just does it at like.
Yeah, but it's like a weird literalization of it.
Yeah, I mean,
and he does it at like weird points. He does it at like weird points when it's kind of like he's like, oh, I need to know where this guy lives. Don't worry, I'm a doctor, and it's like. Doesn't
he flash it to the guy at the mask store as well? Am I imagining that?
No, he does.
Like, don't worry, I'm a doctor. You can open your like weird mask shop.
And at the diner where he like sits at the counter to order coffee, and he's somehow guessing that the woman at the diner will know his friend. And he flashes.
He's like, give me the address. Yeah, like
don't worry, I'm a doctor. Give me the address. And because I've got to think if somebody like showed me their like medical board card, they'd be like, well, I don't know what these things are supposed to look like. I don't like. I also don't understand why you're showing it to me, but like I don't know how I'm supposed to like what I'm supposed to get out of this. Like I didn't know that you had a medical board card that you literally carried in your wallet.
There's a horrifying alternate universe though, where like every like national security show after 9/11 where they're like, I'm in the FBI, like showing like aggressively showing the person they're like FBI like badge or whatever. Like there's that, but it's just like doctors being like I'm a surgeon, and they're like one to get information out of people.
Well, part of it, I mean, I don't know how far I can take this, but it seems, I mean, like insofar as Bill is an extremely well-off, wealthy person that does live in like a. He is in the upper echelons of society, but he has to present himself and say, here, no, I have a credential. I'm supposed to be here. You can trust me. I'm an important person. Whereas like Ziegler and everyone, like those people, the actual like ruling class types in the movie never have to present that. Like they never have to, they never present themselves to any other kinds of authority. I mean, even with like the analogy to police, like in the opening scene, or not the opening scene rather, but like the first scene with Ziegler really in the bathroom with the woman who's OD'd, like if the police showed up to that situation, like Ziegler would be suspected of murder. But like that doesn't happen. There's no consideration for that. It's just Bill, looks at her once and like, oh, I guess she's dead, and like or we move on, or she's not dead. Whatever. But the point being, like, she is dead. No, what am I saying? I'm like confusing characters. It's not like he has to, in order to exist in his world, he's constantly proving himself and showing credentials, saying the right thing, saying the right password. Because that's the only way that he's able to exist in these spaces at all. Like he has a hall pass, whereas like he doesn't control the halls.
Well, that's why the most crucial scene in the movie, I think, is like, and it's jumping ahead just a little bit, but I mean the scene where he's kind of, this is a scene where I think Kubrick famously made Tom Cruise enter the room like 200 times or God knows how many times it was. This is where he's kind of like summoned by Sidney Pollack, it seems like, it's pretty subtle, but nevertheless very direct interaction that he has with Sidney Pollack, where the implication seems to be like you could disappear just like this woman that warned you about me and about us at the party, at the ball. Like you could be disappeared. Like I could squash you like an ant, and nobody would know, nobody would care. And yeah, it speaks. I mean, it's building on what Cale was just saying. I mean, it's like Sidney Pollack doesn't even have to say anything directly. He doesn't have to directly threaten Bill at all. It's enough that like Bill has to come and visit him in this like palatial room where he's just kind of like in the middle of his day or whatever, and he can just sort of like hint at Bill, like, I could end you if I wanted, and that's enough. Whereas Bill is constantly having to like perform his, like, as we've established with this thing with the card or whatever, he's constantly having to perform his like class status and class position, which is like something you only do if you're very insecure about those things.
No, for sure. I mean,
and Bill has to go to these people, like
right.
Because he's a worker. Because to them, he's a work, like in the same way that like to Bill,
he's a very well-paid worker, but but from their perspective, that's still what he is.
He's a worker who I'd imagine has a bit of a stock portfolio as well.
Listen, we can all agree that Stanley Kubrick has not read Eric Olin Wright. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm not even saying like he literally is, like, I'm not making a claim about his objective class position, or I don't think Forrest is. I think it's just that, like, from the perspective of people like Ziegler, right? He's a worker. He's one of the people who they hire to do things for him. So
there are those who serve and then those who are served. I think that's like the most class analysis you get at Kubrick is like there's Kubrick is very big on structures, but then he's big on like who is who's responsive to who and who has to serve who. We're not entering into exploitation or something, or like it's just like pure power, like numbers. We're talking like Dragon Ball Z power levels. Like it's not it's not much more complicated.
Let's just real quickly run through this, right? Okay. The woman who'd OD'd at the first party is one of the masked naked orgy participants who've been brought in to have sex with the rich people at the second party, and she keeps on trying to warn Bill that he shouldn't be here. It's dangerous. He needs to leave. There's this thing that's kind of like I remember the word theatrical was used earlier, and like there's this very theatrical thing, like this shows up all the time in Shakespeare, where it's like if somebody's wearing a mask, the other characters can't figure out who it is, even if it's super obvious that like he's literally like he's seen this woman naked before, like the mask is covering like this, but like it's like, who are you? I don't know. And then
sometimes it be like that, Ben.
Inevitably,
look, it's just that he's just short, so he can't see up to the faces.
Yeah, there you go.
He's looking up at everyone like, fuck, like, is this?
So he inevitably he's found out. There's this whole thing where they're going to do something to him, that he doesn't want to be done. They tell him to get naked. He's not going to do it. And then that woman steps forward to say that she's willing to suffer his fate in his place. And then Tom Cruise asks, what does that mean? And they say, don't worry about it. Her fate is sealed. And then over the course of the next 40 minutes, whatever, he's doing all of this investigating to try to, even though he's been warned not to, he's been warned there'll be dire consequences if he does. He does all this investigating, try to figure out what's going on, where the what's happened with various people. The pianist has left, and it's very obvious that there are people like that who are hired by the rich people at the orgy. Who
that Alan Cummings scene is pretty amazing. His as a hotel clerk or whatever, like he kind of they have him do like a really over the top, which if you've ever seen interviews with him is how he is in general, but like he's kind of like this over the top, extremely flamboyant, like like at some points almost like sexual in some ways, like almost sexualized like hotel clerk character. And it kind of feels like that has kind of a dreamlike quality too, because it's just such a strange interaction.
Yeah, well, it seems like everybody else, in the movie, he wants to have sex with either Tom Cruise or Nicole Kidman.
Yeah.
So, and as always, they're not interested. So
because they don't have sex.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they've never had sex, and
exactly. So he finds out, for example, that the people from the party have, clearly beaten up the pianist and escorted him out of his hotel room. Where he's already checked out. And there's a lot of other stuff like this over the course of the investigation. The only other thing that I think we have to mention as part of this is that when he goes back to the mask shop, the proprietor has had second thoughts and is no longer going to call the cops on these two Japanese men. Instead, he's decided to he's decided to pimp out his daughter to them.
Yeah.
He also, it seems like he's like in that scene, the costume shop owner, like it seems like he's also offering his daughter to Bill as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and this is, by the way, what I was thinking earlier. If you want to play that game of how you could read this as a coded confession for some sort of Epstein stuff, or as a coded reference to that at least. That even though at the actual orgy, it's only adult sex workers, but they do throw in some child trafficking there also. So there is a way that you could connect the dots there.
No, but what he's doing is objectively much worse than what than what the sex orgy is doing. Like he's literally pimping out, like he's sex trafficking his underage, like prepubescent daughter. And that's kind of I think that's really the most like grotesque and graphic that the movie gets, is that scene. And it's kind of interesting that it's just kind of like it's hinted at, and like, you know what I mean? Tom Cruise is kind of like outraged by it, but then kind of lets it go. Like it's not like he's like, you know what, I'm gonna beat this guy up, or like, you know what I mean, something like that. Like he just kind of like lets it happen and walks away after kind of questioning it. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Which is interesting because I think he's like that also ties into what we've been talking about, because one way of reading that is like, well, these are people who are beneath him. He's just not going to take, like, he's going to be disturbed by it for a second, but he's not going to take much of an interest in it. What he's actually interested in are the misdeeds of the people above him in the hierarchy. And so after an hour or whatever of investigating, he ends up back at like Ziegler calls him in, requests that he come, for an audience. And also, by the way, very small detail, but every time in the movie, I think you see him, pouring or asking for a drink 3 times, and 2 of them it's beer in the hotel, or in the bar where he meets his friend the pianist. He just orders beer, which I thought was kind of funny. Like what would you do if you actually just said, I want beer? Would they just choose one at random to give to you? But
he's like a 12-year-old. Like he really is like a 12-year-old that hasn't had sex, is going to like these things, like just kind of like, oh, what do you want? Oh, beer. Like just give me a beer.
Yeah, it's like what does one have in such a situation when you're like in a bar? Like that's what you have, right? A beer.
No, exactly.
Well, I just think it's, with a lot of these things, it's not that it's not like an immaturity. I think it's just like that he sees these things as transactional. That like sex is transactional, like alcohol. These are just like means to ends. And as like this PMC person, like the only thing he really cares about is status and his career and power ultimately. But like
money for him is a means to an end. Like he just, that's why he's always giving the extra money to people. Like it's not like to him, like it's like almost like he has too, like not that he has too much money, but he's in this weird class position where, like it's not that he has too much money to kind of just like I don't know, compared to everybody else around him, but like the actual ultra wealthy like elite around him that he tries to like infiltrate, obviously know better what to do with their money and power, and he's just kind of like, well, I have a lot of this to burn, and like
and he feels like burning it is a way of establishing, his position. It's another version of flashing the card. This is that review that I mentioned before. It's called Introducing Sociology, because that's one of the books that you see at the sex worker's apartment. It's called Introducing Sociology, a review of Eyes Wide Shut by Tim Kreider, and it starts out with the quote from Dr. Bill. So do you suppose we should talk about money? Which kind of sums up the movie in a lot of ways. But in any case, I was just bringing up the beer thing because at least it's the vague working class. I want a beer. Those two times, whereas when Ziegler offers him a drink, he's like, scotch. And, it's almost like, I don't know, that's what you drink, right? Yeah, a lot of scotch. So it's a very informal thing. Ziegler wants to make it clear that they're buddies. At first, right? That he offers to play pool with him. He has a drink with him. He offers to send him a case of the scotch. But then which
is its own like flex. I mean, that's what you at least imagine, like flexing on someone. Like, oh, I like this scotch. It's good. Okay, well, I'll send you a whole case of that scotch. Like, I have that power. I have that. Like, it's like the big fish thing. Like,
yeah. And in that conversation, he admits to at least being at least a member, right, of the cult, which although I think Cale's gonna have some thoughts on that in a minute, based on a video you shared with me earlier today, and he does this thing that is sort of weird and ambiguous, where he mostly is trying to reassure Bill that there's nothing to see here. In some ways that it's like, look, she just died of an overdose. That had absolutely nothing to do with what you saw at the party. That was all play acting to try to scare you. But he also says things like, you don't know how much trouble you're in. If I mention the names of these people, you would really start to sweat, since presumably it's all, Bill Clinton and Dominique Strauss-Kahn and whoever, behind the masks. And he also does this weird thing.
Bill Clinton wouldn't, he's going to like the real Epstein ones. He's not going to like play acting mask. Like, that's beneath him.
Yeah. So he has
piled on the platter. We don't need the mask.
Fair enough. So he tells, but he also does this weird thing when he's saying all of that, which it's like, I think he wants it to be ambiguous whether this explanation is actually true or not. Like, I think he wants Bill to wonder about it, because the way he puts it is, how would you feel if I told you that it was all play acting? And it's almost like, in the way he says it, it almost suggests that it's like, this is bullshit, but would it make you feel any better if you believed it? And he does, he also, at the very end of the conversation, he does this thing. He like puts his arms around, Bill's shoulder, and he's like, hey, somebody died. It's sad, but life goes on until it doesn't.
Yeah.
So there's definitely an element of a threat there, but it's ambiguous. And then he sends him home. The mask, which wasn't there at when he returned his costume, he thought he'd lost it, has been placed like a horse's head on the pillow next to where Nicole Kidman is sleeping. So Bill,
she's sleeping very still. Like, you think, oh, like, there's a small chance like she could be dead or something like that. Like, it could be super ominous. And then it turns out, she's just sleeping, and he's kind of back to his boring like life, and like it's just like a warning. Just like everything else in this movie, like, it's a super soft core warning. Like, they're not.
Yeah, totally. So they have. So then, Bill confesses all to Alice, and then at the end of the movie, they're shopping. They're doing Christmas shopping with their very young daughter, and they're talking it all over. Nicole Kidman says some things that suggest that, like, almost suggests that she thinks that Bill's just describing a dream, and then she ends by saying, "Okay, well, whatever else, like we got to have sex for the second time in our entire marriage. It's time."
Mhm.
So that is the end of the movie. I know we got to wrap up in the next few minutes, but Cale, thoughts about Ziegler's role in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I think I'm fairly convinced, at least in how I understand it, that maybe not literally, but at least like thematically, Ziegler and Red Cloak are supposed to be the same person. That, like, insofar as they play the same role in the two parties, that again, I think I understand like Bill's journey over the course of that night as like. I guess again, if it's a dream or there's something like fantastical, there's something kind of something to do with like Bill's desires and how he actually understands the world, and like even though he's putting a mask on, it's kind of like the more stripped down like version of like what these actual social relations and interactions are between these people. And so insofar as like Ziegler can make Mandy disappear, it's the same power that Red Cloak presumably has, that it's so they, again, at least insofar as like the structures that exist in these in this society and in this in the logic of the film, they have the same kind of power, and I don't know, here thematically Red Cloak is Santa Claus. It's a Christmas movie. No, I don't know.
Well, and that connects to The Shining again, because it's like the same thing as like the two Jacks and the two Gradys, and like kind of like these two characters, one being a far more fantastical interpretation of the other one.
Right. Well, and again, if you agree with my 3-hour analysis of The Shining, I mean, I think the Room 237 sequence is a dream sequence. That I think it's like a means of processing the actual relations that are existing between father and son in that movie. But again, with all of this, I think a lot of it is just, it's like, this is Kubrick, kind of his big analysis of like, it is like kind of professional ideology, but it's like also just kind of like how we, I don't know, at the level of society, like kind of sublimate like all of the really horrific aspects of the ruling class and of like kind of meritocracy. And when of course he thematically puts this around Christmas, which is like this massive like society-wide tradition of we come together and we have this celebration, we're exchanging gifts, we're it's all loving, and I don't know, there's something about like the fantasy element of it, like there has to be a mythology to it to like help us like deal with like the certain aspects of life that are horrific, that are I don't know what Christmas's function is for dealing with horrible things, but like
I think Christmas is, I mean, it's a statement about consumerism to some extent, right? Like Christmas is kind of a consumerist holiday, just as Dr. Bill is hoping that he can kind of consume his way into like basically fooling his way into the ruling class. Like, so I think there's that kind of parallel. Like he throws around money pretty constantly, and like I don't know, like he really is like the ultimate consumer. Like he's trying to buy status through that. So I think
but that's like Christmas in in the last few decades. I mean, there's a traditional aspect to it that precedes capitalism. There's something just about it as like ritual and as tradition that helps us rationalize like society and family relations, and like the importance of like coming together, and there is kind of like an aspect of Christmas of like, let's overlook the the bad aspects of life and cherish the good ones, and so I think
I mean, like the New York Post that he reads, where he finds out that the sex worker died. The big headline at the front is "Lucky to be alive."
Right. Yeah, and so ultimately, again, like when faced with like the brutal reality from Ziegler at the end, that like, yeah, no, we as the ruling class will kill people when we need to. We control your life, and we can put a mask on your bed if we want, and scare the shit out of you. And there's nothing you can do about it. So from at the individual level,
super fucking softcore. Like we can put a mask on your bed if we want. Like we could change your sheets. You're gonna have a different blanket when you get home. Like we're the ruling class, and you can't fuck with us.
Well, but like, okay, what are the two things we do in bed? It's like we sleep and fuck, and so like there's like a fantasy element to all of this, that like the ruling class can control your fantasies, and that's what's occurring with Bill throughout the movie. And so by the end of it, it's like, how else do you deal with this other than you say, okay, I guess we're just gonna, and again, from the point of view of like these professional people, all right, I guess we're just gonna fucking make money. I don't know. Like,
I know what I'd say if like we were doing this on an episode of the prestigious Michael and Us podcast, which I co-host. I'm pretty sure I would end. Thank you, Cale. I'm pretty sure. It like what happens with a lot of things we do on our show is like I'll kind of invent like a reading that sounds funny that may or may not involve Al Gore, but then by the end of the episode, I've actually convinced myself of it. And I think we're kind of coming to that point as we close out this discussion, because I am utterly convinced now that Eyes Wide Shut is a movie about two parts of the Democratic Party coalition. There's the people at the party who are the actual capitalists. They're the real bourgeoisie. They're the ones who control like all of the big investment decisions. They bankroll both political parties. And then you got people like the characters played by Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. They make a lot of money. Yes, they're very prosperous. They're constantly virtue signaling. They've got like they're obsessed with their Tom Cruise is obsessed with his credentials. Like he's probably called like Dr. Bill on Twitter or something like that. You know what I mean? Like Nicole Kidman's character, like we don't know, maybe she has a PhD, maybe she goes like, maybe she like makes people call her doctor. I don't know. But those are the people that like the Democratic Party, like their messaging is always targeting those people. And they're saying like, hey, we're just like you, we're like, we all, we're all cool with gay marriage, like as of, I don't know, circa 2013, 2014, something like that.
The rainbow. There's a lot of rainbows in this movie.
Yeah, that's there you go. There you go. Yeah, I'm really convinced now. Yeah. We've got like progressive values. We're good and just and righteous people, but it's like, let's not raise any taxes, folks, And I think that's
Al Gore. They're completely sexless.
Yeah, that's right. tying it all together in a little bow. So yeah, Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick's prescient take on where the Democratic coalition was heading in a post-Bill Clinton era.
Completely
there you have it,
folks.
Nice. Well, that seems like a good place to close it out on.
The right take.
That was excellent, Luke. If you can generate these on command, we've got to get you back for more of these. So thanks, guys. We'll be back here on Friday for Philosophy Friday with Jen, talk about Bertrand Russell. Sunday, Gene Bajalan and Adnan Hussein are going to be on to watch an old debate with Christopher Hitchens and Edward Said. Old enough that they're on the same side, debating a couple of conservatives about the Middle East. So should be a good time. See everybody then. Thanks again, guys. Left is best.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.